All right, so let's dive into something pretty interesting today. It's Donald Trump's new initiative for a more efficient government, and it's called DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Well, it's not actually a formal department, more of an advisory body spearheaded by Elon Musk. You know him as the force behind Tesla and SpaceX and...
Yeah, he's got a partner in this, Vivek Ramaswamy, a big name from bold business ventures and just recently his presidential run.
It really does make you think, what happens when these two high-profile billionaires set their sights on reforming the government? We've got a lot of sources to unpack today. News articles from CBS, the New York Times, BBC, you know, all the major players. Even a transcript from a Taiwanese news segment. DOGE is making waves globally.
Yeah, we're going to meet all those sources.
Yeah.
Because DOGE has some seriously ambitious goals. Slashing regulations, cutting spending, restructuring agencies, and all of that by 2026, which is, in case you're wondering, the 250th anniversary of American independence. Quite the target date. So where do we even begin with something this big?
Well, I think the best place to start is with their objectives. DOGE's main focus is to make the government smaller and more efficient. They're aiming for some pretty drastic cuts. Talks of trimming $2 trillion from the federal budget.
$2 trillion, that's a lot. I can already hear eyebrows raising out there.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Achieving that level of savings would be incredibly difficult, even if you completely overhauled the entire system. 2/3 of the federal budget is dedicated to mandatory spending. Things like Social Security and Medicare, there's just not a lot of wiggle room.
So even if they wanted to make those cuts, it's pretty unlikely they'd be able to touch those programs.
Exactly. A more realistic target, some experts suggest, might be closer to $200 billion. That would still require some significant changes. But it is more attainable through efficiency improvements and targeted reductions.
So where might those come from? What's on DOGE's chopping block?
Well, Musk has been very vocal. He's been very critical of what he calls government-funded NGOs. He sees them as redundant and wasteful. He even went as far as to label them an illegal arm of the government on X. So that's going to stir up some controversy.
Yeah, he's drawing a line in the sand. What about Ramaswamy? Where does he stand on potential cuts?
Well, he's called for eliminating or completely restructuring several major agencies. We're talking Department of Education, the FBI, even the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
So we've got Musk targeting NGOs, Ramaswamy going after entire agencies. Sounds like they're not afraid to shake things up. But let's face it, neither of these guys are career politicians. Can they actually get this done?
That's the key question, isn't it? DOGE doesn't have any direct authority to implement these changes. It's essentially an advisory body. They rely on influence to persuade the White House and Congress to act.
Like they're trying to steer a giant ship with a tiny rudder.
And it's a ship that's notoriously difficult to maneuver. We've seen this before. Past attempts at streamlining the government, like the Grace Commission under Reagan, largely failed to achieve their goals. There's just a lot of inertia in the system.
Good reminder that just having good ideas isn't really enough. You need the political will and the know-how to actually implement them.
Absolutely. You need to navigate a complex web of competing interests and potential roadblocks.
Which brings us to maybe the biggest question. Will DOGE be able to overcome those hurdles and achieve its goals?
It's impossible to say for sure right now. There are certainly reasons to be skeptical, but there's also potential for DOGE to make an impact.
So we've laid out the basics, DOGE's mission, the key players, and the potential challenges they face. But now we need to dig a little deeper, analyze how this might actually play out.
Well, let's start with the elephant in the room, the potential conflicts of interest. Musk in particular has a lot of skin in the game. His companies, especially SpaceX, they rely heavily on government contracts.
Yeah, that does make you wonder. How objective can he really be when it comes to trimming the budget? What if some of those cuts end up hitting his own businesses?
It's a valid concern for sure, and it's something critics have been quick to point out. They argue that Musk's involvement in DOGE is more about serving his own interests than the public good.
And we can't forget about the whole DOGE merch thing. Right after the announcement, Musk was already tweeting about how cool the DOGE branded merchandise would be.
It did seem a bit premature. The New York Times even published a piece comparing it to Trump's own, fondness for merchandise, and they suggested that DOGE might be more about branding and self-promotion than actual policy changes.
So there's this underlying question of motivation here. Is this a genuine effort to improve the government? Or is it a vanity project for a couple of billionaires who want to, leave their mark?
It's hard to say for sure, But even if we give them the benefit of the doubt and assume their intentions are good, there's still the question of execution. How do they actually plan to make these changes happen?
Well, one thing Musk has emphasized repeatedly is transparency. He's pledged to document DOGE's activities online, make their findings and recommendations public for everyone to see.
It's like opening up the government's books and letting the public audit them. It's an interesting approach, and it could help build trust and accountability.
He even talked about creating a website where people could track DOGE's progress, submit their own ideas for cutting waste, even report instances of government inefficiency they've encountered.
Imagine a platform where you could flag a redundant program or point out an absurdly expensive project. It could be a powerful tool for citizen engagement and oversight.
But let's be real, transparency alone won't fix the problem. They still need to convince Congress and the White House to actually implement their suggestions, and that's where things could get really messy.
Yeah, navigating the political landscape is going to be their biggest challenge. They'll need to build alliances, compromise, find common ground with lawmakers who might not be thrilled about cutting programs or shrinking the government's workforce.
And Musk, well, he isn't exactly known for his diplomatic skills. He's more of a disruptor, a bull in a china shop. Can he adapt to the slow-moving, consensus-driven world of politics?
That's the million-dollar question. His confrontational style and tendency to clash with authority figures could backfire in Washington. But on the other hand, maybe that's exactly what's needed to shake things up and break through the gridlock.
So it could either be his greatest asset or his biggest liability. It all depends on how he plays his cards.
Exactly. And then there's the challenge of actually identifying those areas where cuts can be made. Without causing too much disruption or harm, it's easy to throw out big numbers, like $2 trillion. But the devil is in the details.
Where do you even begin to find that kind of savings? Are we talking about eliminating entire agencies, slashing budgets across the board, or something else entirely?
They'll need to be very strategic and targeted in their approach, and they'll need to have a deep understanding of how different programs work and how they're interconnected.
Otherwise, they risk creating unintended consequences and causing more harm than good. Think of it like a giant Jenga tower. You can't just pull out any piece at random.
Perfect analogy. You need to carefully assess each move and anticipate the ripple effects. And remember, even if they identify the right areas to cut, they still need to overcome resistance from those who benefit from the status quo.
Right. No one likes having their pet projects or their funding sources cut off. They'll be facing pushback every step of the way.
It's a Herculean task, to say the least. But if they can pull it off, even partially, it could have a significant impact on the size and scope of government.
It really does feel like a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
DOGE could either be a catalyst for much-needed reform or a cautionary tale about the limits of private sector influence in government.
Regardless of the outcome, it's going to be fascinating to watch how this plays out. We're talking about potentially reshaping one of the largest and most complex organizations in the world.
It's not just about the numbers and the policy changes. It's about the power dynamics, the public perception, and the fundamental role of government in our society.
And it's a reminder that in the digital age, even the most established institutions are vulnerable to disruption. Who would have thought that a couple of tech billionaires could potentially reshape the U.S. government?
It's a story that's still unfolding, and we're just beginning to understand the implications. But one thing's for sure, DOGE has everyone talking, from Washington to Wall Street, to the streets of Taipei.
It's a global conversation, and it speaks to a wider trend of tech entrepreneurs and innovators stepping into the political arena.
And that raises a whole set of questions about the future of governance, the role of expertise, and the balance of power in the 21st century. So it really is a sign of the times. But let's zoom back in on DOGE. We've talked about the hurdles, the potential conflicts. But are there any areas where they might actually find success?
Well, one area where they could really make a difference, I think, is in leveraging technology to streamline government operations. Think about all the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the outdated systems that slow things down and drive up costs.
It's like the government is still running on Windows 95, while the rest of the world has moved on to the cloud.
Exactly. And that's where I think Musk's expertise could really come into play. He's a master of innovation and efficiency, and he's not afraid to disrupt traditional ways of doing things.
So instead of, slashing programs or firing people, they can focus on making the existing system work better.
Precisely. Imagine a scenario where applying for a permit, filing your taxes, Or accessing government services could be done seamlessly online, without all the red tape and headaches.
That would be a huge win for everyone, from individuals to businesses to the government itself. It would save time, money, and a lot of frustration.
And it's an area where there's already a lot of momentum. Many governments around the world are embracing this digital transformation, using technology to improve efficiency and citizen engagement.
So DOGE could tap into that trend and bring the U.S. government into the 21st century. Technologically speaking, at least.
Yeah, for sure. Another area where they might find some low-hanging fruit is in tackling wasteful spending. There are just countless examples of government programs that are redundant, outdated, or simply ineffective.
It's like, remember that leaderboard Musk talked about creating for the most absurdly wasteful spending?
Right. Yeah, it's a bit gimmicky, but it could actually be a useful tool for identifying those programs that are ripe for cutting, and it could generate a lot of public pressure to eliminate them.
It's like crowdsourcing government waste reduction.
And who knows, it might even be entertaining.
But even if they find all these areas for improvement, they still need to convince the powers that be to take action.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? They can propose all the brilliant ideas they want, but if they can't build consensus and navigate the political process, they'll just be spinning their wheels.
So ultimately, DOGE's success hinges on their ability to influence and persuade, not just on their technical expertise or their business acumen.
Right. It's a reminder that government reform is as much about people and relationships as it is about systems and processes.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the grand vision to the nitty-gritty details, the potential pitfalls to the glimmers of hope.
It's a complex story with no easy answers, and it's one that'll continue to unfold in the months and years to come.
But one thing's for sure, DOGE has ignited a conversation about the role of government, the need for efficiency, and the potential for innovation in the public sector.
And that conversation is happening not just in Washington, but in boardrooms, living rooms, and online forums around the world.
It's a conversation worth having, because the choices we make today about how we govern ourselves, they'll shape the world we live in tomorrow.
So as you continue to follow this story, ask yourself, what kind of government do we want? How can we make it more efficient, more accountable, and more responsive to the needs of the people?
And how can we ensure that technology and innovation are used to empower citizens, not to entrench existing power structures? These are the questions that the DOGE has brought to the forefront, and the questions we all need to grapple with.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into DOGE. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.